UFOs in Arizona, about 100 plus years worth of history up there, dating back all the way from about a week or so ago. Well, actually, no, it's dating back like over 100 years, but about a week or so ago, interesting enough, American Airlines flight 2292 going from through New Mexico heading to Phoenix, just around north of Albuquerque, around Gallup, New Mexico, just about entering the Arizona airspace when pilot reported a large cylindrical object flying at high speed buzzed over top of their aircraft. So UFO stuff, not too long ago. Oddly enough, though, if that plane had traveled about another 25 minutes, it would have been over top of Snowflake, Arizona. That's the flight path that the American Airlines 2292 takes. Now, Snowflake, Arizona, happens to be the location that Travis Walton was abducted back in 1975. It was kind of a neat area, ufologically wise. Again, we're going to be talking to my buddy Tom Dongo. He lives up out of Sedona. We talk about some shenanigans up there with some possible underground bases and UFOs. That is kind of the area that people point to as the source of what is known as the Phoenix Lights. Back in 1992, literally a parade of UFOs that went from that part of Arizona down over top of Phoenix and banked over to the southeast over top of New Mexico. So interesting area. Don't know why that area is busier than most, but it's one of the topics we're going to run into and discuss, throw it out for conversation with my guest, Tom Dongo, author out of Sedona, Arizona, and has been poking around chasing UFOs for about 40 years now, as well as my guest, Craig Campobasso, who is an author out of LA, who we have known Craig is basically for writing a really cool book, and it's the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac. So we're going to kind of push those back and forth. We're going to talk to Tom about stuff that he's heard of out there, and we're going to flip through the book and see if that's something Craig can talk about. And Craig is also a bit of an expert on a fellow named Valiant Thor, who is alleged to have come to our planet in the 1960s with the end-all and be-all of technology and energy and medicine, and then realized that we're not quite ready for all that because we'd weaponize it. So Craig's done his movie, Stranger at the Pentagon, based on Dr. Frank Strange's book back in the day. And we're going to talk a little bit about who Valiant Thor is and where he is now. And we talk about cloaked alien spacecraft. We talk about hybrid beings, the underground bases that are said to be up in northern Arizona, some of which could be U.S. military, and the others are either terrestrial beings that have always been here or off-planet beings. It's fascinating with these guys. When you get them together and they start talking UFOs, it is we could do this for days. So you get, well, Tom's been doing it for 40 years. You get him started and off he goes on his own tangent. I think he said he's been on about 45 different podcasts and radio shows over the last year here, and he's not finished. His stories keep going out there. You may know Tom as a paranormal investigator, a UFO ET researcher, and he does remote viewing. And we do talk about the remote viewing part of his life too, and how he'd love to teach that to people because it's a learned thing. He's a longtime resident of Sedona, Arizona. He's recognized as a world authority and one of the USA's leading authorities on UFOs, paranormal occurrences, and remote viewing. And over the course of those years, he has lectured at numerous international and national conferences, including one of the places I met him at, the International UFO Congress. He studied at the Berkeley International Psychic Institute in Santa Cruz, California, and has spent the last 30 years in the greater Sedona area, which is known as one of the premier UFO hotspots of the world. Tom is a writer of mainstream magazine articles and the author of 8 or 9 books on the paranormal. And one of the books he has out now is a wonderful book, and it's called Merging Dimensions. It is all about the shenanigans, the paranormal shenanigans out at the Bradshaw Ranch, just outside of Sedona. And we touch on that book a bit during the show. Everything you want to know about Sedona in a nutshell is something that Tom has. Now, Craig, on the other hand, Craig Campobasso, is the author of the autobiography on Extraterrestrial. It's a whole series of books. And his passion is to write stories that provoke the reader to think and to raise their own consciousness, to expand their mind. And we discuss some of the beings he's written about in his latest book. Now, this is the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac, the ultimate guide to greys, reptilians, hybrids, and Nordics. Craig directed, wrote, and produced the short film Stranger at the Pentagon, which we mentioned, which was adapted from the popular UFO book authored by the late Dr. Frank E. Strange's. After production of the short film collected accolades, in September of 2014, it won Best Sci-Fi Film at the Burbank International Film Festival, selling out the entire film festival. It was a first, and in 2015 won a Remmy Award for in Houston for the Best Sci-Fi Film there. You can go to Craig's website, autobiographyofan.et.com. That'll spin you off into all his other websites and his other blogs and all his productions that he's working on. Tom Dongo is tomdongo.com. Please, you've got to check these guys out. Drop by, stick around, listen to what they have to say. I'll go get my own resident extraterrestrial, Liam. He'll crank up the show, and we'll see you guys in a couple of minutes with Tom Dongo and Craig Campobasso.
I see you found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, and possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee planet has to offer. Now, here are the Oracles with James Tyson.
Hey everybody, thanks for dropping by. Tom, how are you today?
I'm doing fine. I'm glad to be back on the show again.
Thank you for showing up. Craig, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here with you and with Tom Dongo. It's going to be such a great show.
Oh, it's going to be fun. Now, Tom, you're still in Sedona, or?
Well, I lived in Sedona 33 years. I'm in Cottonwood now.
Cottonwood, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, down in Cottonwood. And Craig, you're in L.A.?
In L.A., yeah.
Perfect. I'm looking after the rainy West Coast up here for you guys while you guys continue with relatively good weather.
Yes, it's
a lot of fun.
Beautiful.
And for those of you joining us or listening along and want to play along at home, you can go to tomdongo.com is Tom's website. And we will be talking a bit about the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac that Craig has out right now. And you can look up that at autobiographyofan.et.com, autobiographyofan.et.com, because if you can't make a website link hard, it's not fun. So, tomdongo.com. Come on.
And if I made it craigcampobasso.com, which I also have, it still would confuse people. So, anyway, yeah, autobiography of unet.com, and then they click other books if they want to get the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And Thomas, what was the Merging Dimensions? That was the Bradshaw Ranch book, wasn't it? That's your right?
Yeah, it's all about the Bradshaw Ranch, the incredible phenomena that went on the Bradshaw Ranch.
Yeah, Tom, when I talked to you last, you mentioned taking a tour. Some people, I can't remember if it was just a couple or something. You took them out in an area where, sometimes people see UFOs out here, and if you kind of will it to come, they may show it to you. And you said that all of a sudden one showed up with a couple of ETs outside kicking the tires on it or something briefly.
Well, then actually there was 3 separate incidents in 3 weeks. The first one, and a friend of mine's an Air Force lieutenant colonel. I asked him about this, and I said, "Now that couldn't have been one of ours. It had to be one of theirs, an alien craft." He said, "Yeah, if it was one of ours, there would have been attack helicopters all around it, and guys jumping out of the helicopters with machine guns." But at any rate, there were 8 of us there that night. We had three movie quality video cameras, and none of them worked. But to make a long story a little bit shorter, there was I noticed it first with binoculars. There was a blue light about a quarter of a mile away, and I started looking at it. And we all had really powerful binoculars that night, so we looked at it, and we realized that it was a disc on the ground that was pretty big, that had flashing lights all around it, and there was a blue light about 100 feet above it. And when we looked at it, it was obvious that it was being repaired at the 5 o'clock spot on the disc. And the odd thing about it was we could see lights flying around like they were repairing the whatever it was. And I suspect it was hit by a missile or something like that. But these lights were there were probably half a dozen of them. And the way they were flying around the 5 o'clock part of the ship, it was obvious they were repairing it. But you could not see, I don't think there was anybody, any person or whatever carrying them. I think these lights were doing the repairing because they were obviously repairing something. And we 2 hours later, they were still there doing the same thing. So in the meantime, this friend of mine had a new girlfriend that he wanted to impress. So he said, "Well, I'm going down there." We all said, "No, don't do that. You're a fool to get near that, you know." But he had a 4-wheel drive vehicle. So he said, "No, I'm going down there." So we tried to talk him out of it. So he drove down there. We were watching him with our binoculars. And we watched him. We saw his headlights, high beam, bouncing, on the way to this craft. And he was getting really close, and we could see from where we were that his high beams were on this ship now. And his girlfriend said later she was about that spot that she said that you can let me out right here. I'm not going to get any closer to that thing, whatever it is. So he turned around and came back, but he got close enough to it that his high beams were on this thing, and it had flashing red lights all around it. A blue, a very strange looking blue light about, I'd say 15 yards in diameter above it. And then another one came up, another blue one came up about 200 feet above it. So there's one to the south and one to the north above it. And when they got close to it, it started to pulse. And I've seen so many UFOs, and to me, I use this really powerful laser. And to some of these UFOs, it's a weapon. It's a beam that's hitting the ship. And I think it sets off an automated defense system, because I've seen this so many times. The ship will start to pulse. And I think that's kind of a warning that their defense systems are powering up. At any rate, so they left and they came back up, and we were still a little bit mad at him, but we were going down there. But all our cameras wouldn't work. They wouldn't focus on this thing at all. One of them was a very expensive movie quality camera, video camera. And so when we left 2 hours later, it was still there doing the same thing. And that's when I asked my friend, the colonel. He said, "No, that was not one of ours. That was extraterrestrial. Otherwise, there would have been attack helicopters flying around it and guys with machine guns in the bushes." So, yeah. And then 2 weeks later, a situation happened where we saw this things that they're orange, and they blink on, blink off, and different shapes, different sizes, different places, a mile apart. So I said, let's just for the heck of it, let's in our minds say, "Please, would you materialize at least for 5 seconds so we could see what you are?" And so, believe it or not, what happened was, and then this thing blinked on, and it must have been a quarter of a mile across, and it was shaped like a boot, like a work boot, but it was at least a good quarter of a mile across, and it had a light in front of it. Like at night, you've seen boats on the water, and there'll be a light on front of it. Well, that's what that light looked like. So it was on for exactly 5 seconds. And I mean, this thing looked like a work boot. And it had three, it was orange, completely orange. And there were three lights over the boot part. And then it blinked out. A week later, I had another tour, and it was different women. And I said, well, this worked last week, so let's try it. Let's see what happens. Because the orange lights are blinking on about 18 miles away over Mingus Mountain. And so we in our mind, we said, please materialize for at least 5 seconds so we can see you. So what happened was, and I wish to this day, we'd had a camera equipment that could have recorded this. We all know what Roman candles are. Well, this thing was 18 miles away. So it shot orange Roman candles up into the air, miles up into the air for about 2.5 seconds one way, and then the other way it did the same thing. And these orange balls of light were a good quarter of a mile across, and it lasted exactly 5 seconds. So that was in 1 3-week period. Incredible stuff.
Yeah, that's well. You live in one of the most interesting areas for aerial phenomena that I've ever been to. In your experience up there, have you ever, in all your years and decades of UFO chasing and talking to people who've had experiences, have you ever seen any of the beings?
You know, I've seen. That's a good question. I've seen. I've run into Nordic types and tall white types a few times, but didn't talk to them. For 10 years, I chased extraterrestrials, and they were always one step ahead of me, but close. Somehow they were close, you know. But I've seen 300 or 400 UFOs, actual metallic crafts, but not up close extraterrestrials. No.
Craig, you've your book, the ET or Extraterrestrial Species Almanac. You've had an opportunity to interview a lot of people who've had experience face to face with these beings.
Yes.
Tom's mentioning the white Nordic types. Is that one of the ones you have in your book?
Yes, those are the Pleiadians, the Lyrans, Vegans, some Syrians. Just sort of depends on where it comes from. So it's in universal history, it said that the Nordics began in the Lyra system, and then they started venturing out into Vega, the Pleiades, and then venturing out further and populating other planets. The Pleiadians also lived here at a certain point. There was another race called the Clermers. It was either the Clermers or the ones from planet Coldas, not Coldas. Because everybody goes, did you just say? I said, no,
yeah.
No. I said it's Koldas.
Oh, yeah, completely different.
Right, but pronounced the same way, basically.
I could tell you a joke. I could tell you a joke about that happened about 25 years ago at a UFO conference, but Coldas. But anyway, go ahead. Keep going.
and the beings from Coldas, they also were here and populated the planet. And so their DNA, and plus there's so many other DNA. And you know, when I try to explain to people what a hybrid is, I said, I'm a hybrid. I'm a mutt of Europe. Right? So I'm a hybrid of all of those different nationalities. It's the same thing for, I interviewed a lot of extraterrestrial hybrids over a period of time and learned about their stories and how they became a hybrid. I was actually really good friends with one hybrid who passed away. And she had 4 different races in her, and her father worked for the military, and they did a genetic exchange with these races. And so they used his sperm, his wife's egg, and the ETs injected the egg, and then she was born. She didn't even know until she was somewhere in her 30s. Other ETs believe that that the embryo, they're star seeds, right? So they were coming in with a purpose, that the egg was also injected with extraterrestrial DNA from the planet that they're from, so that they would gain knowledge of those types of things. The interesting thing about it is that they actually can speak those languages, which is very interesting as well. And some of them also speak the light essence language, which is sort of a language more of the heart, in tonal qualities and things of that nature. So right now I'm actually I'm making a documentary to the ET Almanac. And so I'm bringing forth all these wonderful people together to sort of bring it to life, and we learn more about these things, and we will also have a CGI artist bring a lot of the artwork and all the beings to life as well in the documentary. So it's really, really fascinating stuff. Because as you know, when you dive deep in, like I will be honest with you, if I were to see one of them speaking this other language and I was totally asleep and knew nothing about nothing, I would think it was totally strange, right? But as you sort of progress, and I've met even a lot of children that are coming up, and they have all of these extraterrestrial qualities in them. There's a boy, when I met him, was 15. He already spoke 4 to 5 star languages. He was writing star maps, drawing star maps. Him and his little brother built machines. Their parents actually paid to buy all the materials and building materials and all the kind of stuff that they needed. And they were building machines that were going to help humanity. And they would tell me how they worked and showed me all this. I'm just like, well, that's how it starts. It starts when they're young and they're building this stuff. So when they become of age, they're going to do some really great work here.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I know people who speak light language.
Yes.
And a friend of mine, Soloretta Anteria, is out of Australia. She said she learned it like in the crib, literally, from some beings. And a Japanese documentary was filmed, and they took her or brought a lady from Italy in who only spoke Italian, and she only spoke, Australian, English, Solretta, and they put them both in a room, and they spoke to each other in light language, separated them, and interviewed them, and go, yeah, they knew exactly what they were saying, which is bizarre, because it's almost like speaking in tongues.
Yes, right. Yeah, and one lady was speaking. She knows several languages. She knows 10 languages, including the light essence language, and she spoke Octuran to me and Pleiadian. Interestingly enough, while she was speaking it, I literally felt my whole aura and spiritual vibration elevate. I became very light when hearing the vibration of the language, which I explained to her afterwards, and she said, yes, a lot of people feel that.
I wonder if that's like a tonal thing, like in sound healing and things like that.
Yeah, I bet you it is.
The various in tones. The vegans, they bother me because they're always criticizing the way I eat. And they're constantly telling us they're vegans. I think that's right. I'm not sure. Tom, have you or Craig, have you ever been up to Sedona?
I have, and the last time I was there, I visited with Tom and my other friend Lori, and I was going to say, Tom, one of the most fascinating stories that you told me, and this man is filled with a million of them. I mean, I started going to Sedona on the very first harmonic convergence back in 85, 86, whenever that was. I think it was 86. And I would go to a bookstore and I would find a book by Tom Dongo, the local guy, right? And I would buy the book and I would read the book while I was in Sedona and learn. And so every time I went, I always went seeking a Tom Dongo book. And then over the years, we eventually met, and I still have all his books, and I have the latest edition of Merging Dimensions, which is so good, so fantastic. I mean, the information in there on the Bradshaw Ranch, that's the book right there Tom was holding up. But he was telling me a story and had sound with it. You were out in the desert with some people, and it was like these extraterrestrial beasts were fighting or something, and there was the ship noise and all of that. Can you tell that story, Tom?
I can play it for you if you want to hear it.
Oh yeah, I would love that. I would love that.
It'll give me a minute for this thing to charge up, but you know, I want to. My connection with extraterrestrials. I call myself a master remote viewer, and I've compared my abilities with other remote viewers, and I'm just as good as the best. I mean, so anyway, I'm not, I'm kind of blowing my own horn, but I have no ego about this stuff. So my connection with extraterrestrials is remote viewing, basically. I kind of get into other people's stuff. So I can speak their language, kind of. It's, something's going on right now amongst extraterrestrials. I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of chaos, whether it's what's going on this planet or what, but they're all stirred up like bees, extraterrestrials. And so because I spoke their language in the past, it's a telepathic language with pictures. A picture is worth 1,000 words. And that's the way I communicate with them. So I've done it so much in the past, I guess I'm linked with them all the time. So I'm kind of, my ear is kind of tuned into the extraterrestrials. And by the way, they all speak the same language. It's like scientists that, they speak English. They might be 100 different languages, but they all speak English mostly so they can communicate with each other, English. And the extraterrestrials are the same way from my point of view. And I think they're born with this ability to communicate with each other. It doesn't matter where they're from in the dimensions or universes. So I hear this, and I know that something is really stirred up right now, big time. I don't know what it is. I'm trying to, tune into the cacophony and see if I can figure out what it is. But it's big. It's something big, whatever it is. Whether it's something that's, something's going on in outer space, or something that's going on here, something going on the planet, or asteroid headed this way. I don't know, but I'm trying to get a. Get a link on that. I'll play this for you. Hold on a second. It's pretty weird.
It is. Oh man, it just gave me chills and goosebumps.
And you teach remote viewing classes too, don't you, Tom?
Well, I've been trying to get around to teach it. Yeah, I would love. I said on the last show I was on, I would spend the rest of my life teaching remote viewing free. Because what I can see with remote viewing is so incredible. Very few people can understand what I see. I have a whole different vision, and I want 1 million people to be like that. I mean, I would easily, happily, if I could afford to, spend the rest of my life teaching remote viewing, and it can be done. Remote viewing is not a psychic ability; it's something teachable.
It's taught, yeah.
Yeah, Anybody can learn it. And
there's some people with psychic ability can do it naturally, and other people can be taught.
Yes, yeah. There are people that are great psychics can easily be taught remote viewing. It's just a flip, they're because I've done it, I've seen it. So, but it can be taught right from the beginning. It can be taught, and it's an incredible thing. And so I'm trying to put it together in this area, but with COVID, with high rental stuff for space and all that, it's been really tough. But I'm still we're trying to do it. So let me find this thing here. Okay, so let's see.
You check your thing as soon as it comes up. Give us the heads up there.
Yep.
Craig, have you ever been involved in like remote viewing or talking to people about remote viewing?
I know a bunch of remote viewers. I can do it to an extent if I practice it more. I definitely can, but a lot of times I will just project myself to where I'm going to see, to check in on the environment or something like that. And a few times I saw that there was either a bad accident or it was something of that nature. So I decided to go a different route, and then I would hear of the bad accident. So I use it for that type of, for travel and that type of stuff.
So you're in LA, so you'd get a remote viewing SIG alert.
That's it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I was involved in a bunch of those. I used to, when I used to stay down there a month a year.
Oh, yeah.
So I got good at going, okay, off the 405, onto the 10. Okay, good.
Oh, man, it's so confusing here. I mean, I've lived here, so I know pretty much all the roads. And when I was young, I was a messenger, so I had to drive all over. So I learned all of the back roads in the Hollywood, Beverly Hills, all the studios and things. But
cool.
I mean, somebody coming here for the first time, it is gigantic, especially when actors come. I always ask them, well, where are you living? Because if they're living in a bad area, I'll say, you are in a bad area. You might want to think about moving. Because people don't know. People don't know.
Oh, no, they don't.
Come to Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
So,
I want to.
I'm ready.
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah. By the way, remote viewing, all it is projecting your subconscious to a place. The distance is meaningless, and you can go into the future and into the past. I can go into the past very easily, but it's difficult for me to go into the future. And I think it was Lynn Buchanan, the great remote viewer, said that if a remote viewer goes into the future, it changes the future. And that kind of scared me. I thought, damn, I never thought of that.
Right.
So anyway, remote view. If I can, I'm going to teach remote viewing, and I wish I could do it free. Okay, this is it.
Go ahead. Do a bit of a setup for it again. What is?
There we go.
Yeah, there you go. We can line that up if you can.
You guys hear that?
Yep.
I see it's about 500 to 800 power degrees.
It was like that noise Predator makes.
it kind of it does. Yeah, it does sound like that.
Yeah, there's some pauses here. That's it.
What? Now, how did you capture those? What's the circumstances?
A fellow here in town, John Polk, actually was with a group, and they went out. They were out on, looking for UFOs, and they all got that on their cell phones, but they didn't see anything. So Jim Dilatoso, who's I'm sure the world's expert on stuff like this, he said he was going to send it to Stanford University. They have a data bank of noises that sounds that they can compare that to. And so I haven't heard from Jim. I'm not worried about it. But he was Jim Dilatoso. I put it right up to his ear at a conference, and I said, Jim, have you ever heard anything like that in all your years of your incredible research? And he said, no, never. and it's real. This is not hoaxed in any way. Whatever that thing is, this is not a hoax. It's not a machine made. It's not somebody fooling around. It's real. So,
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. I've heard the Sierra sounds, the Sierra Nevada recordings of Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
They're similar, but actually, well, they're not really similar. They're the same kind of pitch, I guess. But they were almost like somebody speaking a guttural Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it seemed to me there's two creatures stand off. It seemed like a big creature and a little creature that's kind of trying to defend itself. This big thing is going like this, and you can hear a whirring sound. If you really, I need to have. We were trying to get this filtered. And there's a whirring sound in the background. You can hear it in the far background, a whir, 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 like that. And then these two things seem to be real close to the cell phone. So it's gotten around. So maybe sometimes somebody will come up with something incredible about it, because it's not hoax. It's absolutely not a hoax.
So
he had them out. He had them out in. That's correct, right? Like he had this group out in the desert and they were filming. Yeah. I mean, they did that. So this is in the middle of nowhere that maybe it was a mass craft or something like that, an interdimensional where nobody could see, but the sounds were coming through.
Yeah, nothing was near them. No other people, no machines, nothing was near them. So, but they almost all got that sound on their smartphones. So it's pretty weird. I mean, with all the weird stuff that goes on around here, that's pretty weird.
Yeah. Earlier mentioning the craft up by Mingus Mountain, not too far from where you are. Tell my listener a little bit about that. Mingus is kind of an active location, isn't it?
Well, I was on Coast to Coast talking about that stuff. There are probably 4 or 5 extraterrestrial bases here, and some of them are U.S. military. They're all different. And Mingus Mountain and Jerome back in the 1900s, $1 billion worth of copper was taken out of under Jerome. There are 77 miles of dry tunnels. Probably most of them are dry. Anything could be down there. And a tunnel system was drilled to Jerome about 20 years ago, and it went right under the Bradshaw Ranch. Everything on the ranch was shaking. The windmill was shaking. The poles, any pole was shaking. The pipes in the ground were rattling. And the drilling went underneath and went up to Jerome. And a few years later, another tunnel was drilled straight west. These are big tunnels, probably 50 feet. I'm guessing. But when the tunnel went from Jerome to the west, I talked to people up there, and they all said you could hear that thing underground going right underneath us, and it was shaking everything. So, was it extraterrestrial or was it one of ours? We got all kinds of, we have the nuclear ones now that melt their way through. They don't have to drill. There's pictures of them on the internet, the nuclear, and they melt their way through. So there's one base here that I'll tell, really well-seasoned researchers where it is, but it's very dangerous. It's a U.S. base. It's very dangerous. And I can prove, I know exactly, I know all about it. So as a friend of mine, he was a counterterrorism expert, and he had his life threatened twice. They said the second time, you come back here again, we'll kill you. That's what they told him. So they're not fooling around. Yeah, and I know there's a couple of other bases in this area near Clarkdale that are extraterrestrial. I've had one of my friends was an ex-CIA agent that was in with us, and an Air Force intelligence guy that ran smack dab into these U.S. types. They wear U.S. military uniforms with no insignia. They're current U.S. military uniforms, but they have no insignia on them. And most of them are packing either machine guns or 9mm. So, I mean, I could go on all weekend. I could tell stories about this for the next 3 days. So, yeah.
Which is cool. Like the first time you and I met, Tom, you were this is 5 years ago, I think. Yeah. And we met and did an interview in person in and we met in a small town in Arizona at a picnic table in a park.
Stockdale.
And you were at that time cautious of being followed.
Yeah, well,
and not wanting to talk about some of this stuff.
Well, I just turned 76 years old, so I'm not too worried about this stuff anymore. I know. It seems like all of the bounds are off. It doesn't seem like anybody cares anymore about what's going on, what to talk about. There, people used to get killed right and left. In fact, a friend of mine wrote a book. Oh gosh! Anyway, he documented 230 UFO researchers that had been murdered in his book. Oh gosh, I almost remember his name. He's in Brazil now. He's a college professor. 230.
Wow.
And he named him all the situations and everything. I can't remember his name.
Is he an American that moved to Brazil?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I talked briefly to him.
Oh, Shellhorn. His last name is Shellhorn.
Shellhorn? Okay, maybe not then. I talked to a guy who had actually experienced down in the tunnels, like these underground areas where human personnel and ET personnel were working together, and they were linking all over the place. And he was afraid if he came back to the U.S., he'd be killed. Yeah,
I know who you're talking about. He's in Bolivia right now.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a good friend. He's a good friend of mine, or was. But I had in Clarkdale, where we had that interview in that same area, there were two off-duty police, active duty police that had. These are four guys that didn't. It was separate days, separate people. They got into the base in Clark. There's one near Clarkdale. It's only about a mile from where you and I were at that table. These two police got in it. They found an open manhole cover, and went down in there. And they said there were tunnels going everywhere. Now these are police. They're not going to make up stories like that. So they were down there, and they said that suddenly U.S. military were flooding with all. They had M16s. So they said you can just you didn't see anything, go back to where you came in, go up and leave and forget. But so anyway, they told a few people that I heard about it. We looked for it. We knew where. I still know where it is, but you're not going to find it. We had metal detectors. It was probably rubber. So and they cover it over. You're never going to find it. Never. So anyway, stuff like that's been going on around here for a long time. And some of the activity in Sycamore Canyon, I consider Sycamore, it's a beautiful canyon, but I consider it to be very dangerous because the negative ET stuff that's happened around here has been in Sycamore Canyon. It's 33 miles long. It's beautiful springs and big creek. So this is like I say, you get me started, I can go for the next 3 days with stories. Yeah.
Well, what I've been hearing, and I've heard this a couple of years ago, and again from remote viewers, ET experiencers, that the more negative ones, there's kind of a race of reptilians, and it's not just reptilians aren't just one group; it's a whole bunch of subgroups in the reptilian makeup.
That's right. And
one of these groups is a little more anti-human than the other ones, and the discussion around them was that they are actually the terrestrial beings. It's their planet, and they have these hives that are under certain places. A lot of the old extinct volcanoes, and the hives are built there, and they're the ones who have the tube-shaped, like the Tic Tac shaped UFOs, or the tube ones, and they're actually Earth dwellers, and then us bastardized DNA experiments occupy the top part, and they're a little pissy when it comes to us screwing up the landscape. But they're the terrestrial ones. But anyway, that was a discussion we were having with some experiencers and some remote viewers a year or so ago. But have you heard about what race would be the cranky ones down in Sycamore Canyon?
No, but I can tell you they're humanoid. I've interviewed about 15 people that have had human interaction, direct human, and in every case they said it was wonderful. These were human extraterrestrials. They weren't walk-ins. People always say to me, "Oh, were they walk-ins?" I said, "No, these were from outer space. These people they knew they're from another planet. And they were visiting here, and they proved it. Everybody that they talked to proved somehow, they showed them something that couldn't possibly have come from this planet. In a couple of cases, they actually went on their ship. So you want to see our ship? Yeah, sure. So they just took them over their ship, and they went inside her, And in one case, that it was in Mexico, and if the federales find us, we've got to be gone as fast as we can. So the guy was they were up on a hill, and the guy just moved his hands, and this ship comes up out of the jungle, way down, a disc, and flies up to him and stops. This ladder-like thing comes down, and he said, "Well, let's go on, climb on." So they started to, and they started yelling. These were Nordics. They all had Nordics. They all had blonde hair. Every one of them had beautiful blonde hair, and they were extremely attractive people. And somebody came yelling, "Federales, federales!" So he said, "Well, we've got to leave right now." There were about 25 or 30 of them. They had, I think, 3 ships. So they said, "You guys get out of here quick. The federales are coming." So they did. They beat it. They took their Jeep back up this incredible road. I got down there. Long story. But anyway, so my really closest dealings have been with human extraterrestrials, and I have met some of them, and I didn't know they were extraterrestrial until they were gone. In fact, I'll tell this story real quick. In a Safeway supermarket of all places, about 6 months ago, I was walking around, and I noticed a girl and a guy, and he was about 6'5", and one eye was blue and one eye was green, like a Siberian husky. Mm-hmm. And the girl was she was a tall white. So I was 5 feet away from her. I walked over to her, and you could tell she was terrified. She didn't know what to do. And I said, "Well, this is not a normal human." Because she had wraparound sunglasses on and almost pure white skin, and she was dressed all in black, probably to keep light from reflecting. But at any rate, she was standing in the middle of the aisle, and people were pushing their carts around her, and it seemed like they didn't see them. I'm going, this is crazy. Because the guy would, first glance, I saw the guy, with the height, and the eyes, 2 different eyes. So I'm standing right beside her, studying her, and I could tell she was terrified. And so the guy, he was over, in some other shelves. I see him come out, and he could see what the problem was. So he went over and gently took her by the arm and led her away. And I was studying her, I was 5 feet away. She was a tall white, and they're extremely dangerous to us.
In what way are they dangerous to us?
They don't like us. As I've done a lot of studying about tall whites, and they flat out don't like us for some reason. So anyway, so I got they didn't say anything to me. They didn't even look at me. So they were pushing a cart up and down the aisles, and everybody says, "Well, what did they buy? What did they buy?" They didn't buy anything. They were studying the food we were eating. I'm sure they were saying, look at this. The humans actually eat this crap. That's probably what they were saying.
I say that when I go into Safeway. So
So anyway, that was that. And I had a couple more. We'll be here all night if I talk about it.
Craig, the tall whites, do you have a chapter on them or a few paragraphs on them in your book?
No, I was going to include them, but I didn't have enough room, and I had to figure out which ones to take out. But there is information that they have actually been on this planet for about 80,000 years.
Yeah.
Right. And that one of their bases is out by Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. And then Charles Hall has written many books about the tall whites and the grays, because he worked at this military installation where the tall whites were on one side and the grays were on the other. They had their own sections. And he sort of in the middle of the desert was in this little shack, if you will, monitoring and that kind of thing. And he talks about how long it took to actually get the teacher, I think he called her the teacher, to sort of trust him. But he did talk about that ones that they didn't like, they offed them.
Yeah.
Yeah. The tall lights. Yeah.
I was at the Alamo at conference, a UFO conference about 10 years ago. And he spoke before I did, so I got a chance to listen real closely to what he said. And he said that they killed a general. They didn't like it as a general that was out there on the base, and they killed him just like that. Yeah. So they're nasty. They're real nasty. Some of the visitations he had with their kids, evidently really scared him. His kids scared the hell out of him. They're tall white kids. So yeah, if I know anything, I stay away from them. I try to stay away from ones like them.
Yes, and interestingly enough, there's also a race called the Tall Blacks, which are more gray oriented. And interestingly enough, I was doing a show last night, and the actual operator who's in the booth controlling everything after the show actually said, he chatted me and said, please stay on. And he was telling me a harrowing, terrifying experience with one of these tall black grays that he woke up, he was in paralysis. It literally had crawled on top of his body and was looking him in the eyes, and he was trying to fight it, and he was trying to actually bite it or scratch it, but he couldn't move. But the gray actually used its claws and scratched his leg, and in the morning, when he got out of bed, he noticed the 3 scratches as well. So, but I said, so where do you live? They live on like 100 acres in the middle of nowhere in like New York, upstate New York somewhere. And I said, well, you're in UFO territory. I mean, he just started, and then his mother came in, and she was telling me and drawing these beings that are coming to her. And I mean, beings I have never in my life seen before. The strangest heads and bodies and eyes and things that like I have never seen. I have learned so much doing this book just by people writing to me and telling me about the beings that they're seeing and their interactions with them, whether they're positive or negative. Most of them have been positive, but several of them have been negative.
Well, I'd like to interject here that, I probably interviewed, I'm guessing, about 400 people in the last, I've been in this about 40 years now. So, many of them were terrified or near suicide. And, I have found that it wasn't what the extraterrestrials were doing. The terror was on the human end. The extraterrestrials were just doing whatever they were doing. And the interesting thing is, I found this absolutely fascinating. All these people, no matter what experience they had with extraterrestrials, when it was all over, these people had greatly accelerated consciousness. They took better care of themselves. They worried about the planet. They took care of animals better. They became very kind people. So to me, that means the extraterrestrials were trying to do something good for the planet, for humans.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Tom, tell me. Can I just ask Tom a question real quick?
Of course, yeah.
Tom, we were talking like a week or two ago, and you had mentioned Linda Moulton Howe and the zebra beings. Can you tell that story one more time?
Yeah, it actually, she was in Peru somewhere. I don't remember the story. They weren't the actual extraterrestrials themselves, but evidently she went to a village, 20,000 feet up in Peru, and the extraterrestrials had left, but they had been breeding with the villagers. And she found some of these people in a marketplace, and they were like zebras. They had zebra skin, and the extraterrestrials had skin like that, black and white, like zebra. Yeah. And she I can imagine this. She said it was pretty stunning. I can imagine it was.
Well, it's so interesting because Dr. Frank, when he was alive, once told me when he was on the Valiant Thor starship, he said, you can't believe all of the different colored beings and the skin colors and the shadings and all of that. And he said, and do you know that there was even some beings who had black and white skin that were striped like a zebra? And that's so when I heard you say that, I had never mentioned that to anybody because it was just so out of the ordinary. And then when you mentioned that, I just thought, wow, I mean, there it is.
Yeah, validation.
Right? Yeah, validation. Absolutely.
Well, it's another reason I want to teach remote viewing, because remote viewing, extraterrestrials can't take you by surprise. There's a story that Linda told, and this is a shadow on my lip. It's like I got a big sore on my lip and some kind of a shadow from the light coming in that way. So anyway, oh gosh, what was I going to talk about?
Linda.
Yeah, right. So anyway, Linda, she talks about this base she found in Antarctica. There's evidently a huge hole with ships flying in and out of it.
Yes.
And it's been pretty well documented. There's an extraterrestrial base there. So, and she said these are the worst of the worst. So because being curious like me, right? She evidently remote viewed it. Some of these people do the dumbest things. Some of the great remote viewers do stuff to me. I mean, I could tell stories for the next 2 hours about this. But anyway, Linda went into this base. You can't do that stuff. So evidently she got traumatized tremendously. There were 16 scientists that came back, and they were so traumatized they can't speak. They won't speak to anybody. They won't tell them what they saw. So what the hell did they see? So anyway, I got close to it, and I just to feel it. I got as close as I dared to it just to feel it, and I could tell these things. These extraterrestrials were not. You didn't fool around with them. I wouldn't say they were actually death to humans, but they don't want to be messed with. They're probably a billion years ahead of us. But so anyway, I just checked it out. And you can do that with remote viewing. You can get close, and that's the thing. And I go out on. This is easy for a remote viewer. And Joe McMarnigle, I was he was the top remote viewer in the country at the time. And Joe was standing right beside me, and I have a habit of going on alien spacecraft out in space. It's easy when you're a remote viewer; it's not hard. But I'm thinking I must be going nuts. I've got this. Am I really going crazy, or am I imagining this stuff? So Joe McMarnigle standing beside me. He did something that I knew you didn't do right from the beginning. He went up to an alien spacecraft, and there's thousands of them out there. And he got close to it, and he got warned, stay away, but he didn't. And the closer you get, there's an undeniable feeling that they want you to leave, to get away. So he didn't. He went onto the ship, and so I'm going, oh man, I learned. Well, I could tell stories. I got three or four more stories to tell. But anyway, Joe went in there, and they put him in a cage. The extraterrestrials, he said, we warned you. And they put him in a cage they wouldn't let him out of. So they kept him there, scared him to death. And I'm going, I'm thinking, I get close, I get warned, I'm gone. And you get close to an alien spacecraft, and they welcome you. Go on, go right into it, go right through the wall. And I go in there, and they're looking at me like, oh, another damn human. But I wandered around and look at their equipment, and any good remote viewer can do this. They're just kind of humoring. They're going like this, but it's not so clear that I could draw the gauges out. It's all kind of like opaque. It's never really clear. In animals, I feel like a ghost sometimes when I do remote viewing. I had a psychologist friend who worked with me for about 6 months to prove my abilities. And I could go to his house. He couldn't see me, but his dog could see me. The dog would, you know. And I one time I went down. I said, "Well, you little blank blank. You can actually see me, can't you? But animals can see you, like, you know. So it must be like a ghost when you're remote viewing a place." So anyway, that's my story.
Yeah, what if it's just a portion of your energy is there, and therefore they can either sense it or actually physically see like a ripple or some kind of energetic.
Well, to me, it's like, see, I deal with ghosts too. I have for a long time. I can find ghosts in the house and talk to them, or ask them why they're still there. And a ghost is, to my vision, is opaque. Mm-hmm. They're never really clear. But if they have a powerful energy, they're opaque. And then when I can focus on them a little bit, then I can talk to them. I've done this many times. So that's probably what a remote viewer looks like to a dog or a cat. You know, you've seen your cat look all around, you know, like this. There's nothing there, but the cat sees something. You know, so what do they see? So remote viewing is an incredible thing, and I really hope I can teach it. I want 1 million people better than me to remote view, because, you know, this would be a different world if there were many remote viewers, many. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Greg, you wrote or actually did a movie on Valiant Thor and the Stranger in the Pentagon. What is that about? Like, who was Valiant Thor, and what intrigued you about that?
Well, I read the book came out in 1967 originally, and I read the book somewhere in the 80s, and it's vignettes of stories about Valiant Thor, some of his vice commanders, Dr. Frank Strange's life and the events that happened to him throughout the years. Knowing Thor, he met him in December of 1959, first off, and then the second time he met him was sometime in 1961. So the original story is, it was prophesized through extraterrestrials who came and told our government that a universal emissary, a created being, or an angelic in human form, was going to come and meet with the president, and that he would discuss with them ways to eliminate disease, poverty, how to prolong life, and then, of course, talk to them about all the other little things that the world was in need of: free energy, how dangerous atomics were, among many other things as well. So he arrived on a Saturday morning, landed in his craft in Alexandria, Virginia, in an agricultural field. And he was picked up, brought to the Pentagon, where he met with the Secretary of Defense. And then they got and boarded the underground train and went across to over to the White House. And interestingly enough, Dr. Frank was was friends with a lot of the old-time generals from that era. I met many of them when they were in their 80s, and they would describe all of this stuff to me, right? The train system and going into the bowels. Also, Major George Filer, who does the Filer Files. He was there at the time of Valiant Thor. He heard about him being there, and he said he was even walking down the hallway one time, and the guy he was with said, "You know, the alien lives through that door." Right? And so anyway, to compact the story, he met with the president, the vice president, joint chiefs, all of that. He would become the guest of our government for 3 years. And during that time, they would discuss the proposal and learn how to implement it throughout the United States if it got approved. And then when proven successful, then share it with the rest of the world. So what's not in the book is what happened during that 3-year span of time that he was there, right? Because there's just little blitz of stories. So I was able to sit with Dr. Frank for literally years and hear him tell all his stories. And he would be telling a story, and then he would have an afterthought. He says, "Oh, one time I was on the starship, and I saw these beings." And he starts mentioning the colors, and that's where I would learn about the striped zebra skin, or little different side notes of just things that were afterthoughts to him. And anyway, this is around the time that the military-industrial complex was getting on its legs. So they had their own agenda, and which was outside of the government. And really what they wanted was Thor's technology, because it was based on organics. All the craft they had from Roswell and all the other crashes were not organic, and they wanted that technology. Right. So, and of course he wouldn't give it to them. He wouldn't give them any technology, explaining to them that they were not, that we're dualistic beings, and that we're still aggressive, and that we would only use it for harm to gain control of everyone on the planet. So anyway, and he just told them flat out. I mean, Dr. Frank said, if you asked him a question, he wouldn't lie to you at all. And you would feel, even if you didn't like the answer, he would still tell you what it was, right? So, and not in a hurtful way, but he would just tell you the truth, and then you would just have to figure out what you wanted to do with that. I know from the experiences that he's told me of a lot of other people that he gave advice to, and they didn't heed it. They were very sorry that they didn't, because when hindsight, a created being can see a prospect of the future and will only give you information in your best interest, right? So if you go against that, then certain, who knows what the chain of events are that would happen. So, yeah, go ahead.
So where was he from?
Well, he lived on the interior of Venus. I myself believe that he originally came from the Pleiades system, but you have to remember he's a created being. He could be as old as when this universe was created, because all the created beings are created at once. Right?
What's a created being?
A created being is an immortal. They go into the angelic classification. So I would put Valiant Thor as a high seraphim, right? Because he's always given the most difficult tasks to do. So a created being doesn't have a belly button. They don't have palm prints or fingerprints, and Valiant Thor had neither of those. Created beings are just boom. The source, Godhead, whatever you want to call it, just creates them. Boom, they're here, and they have consciousness, and they're ready to go, because all of this is already on the inner, in the invisible worlds. They're just bringing it forth into this 3D theater, right? Which they would be multi-dimensional.
Where would he be now?
He is still on planet Earth.
Oh.
Yeah. And his craft Victor 1 is a 300-foot in diameter craft. It holds 200 people. There's a giant fleet. His starship is 7 miles wide and 14 miles long. And the fleet is stationed in and around the Earth in 287 locations. Yeah, so his is actually stationed at Lake Mead. It originally, in the 70s, sort of anchored in Henderson, Nevada, but then they started building a whole bunch of homes. So they moved it over to Lake Mead. Actually, in the book Stranger at the Pentagon, the coordinates to where the ship is actually in the book. And I've gone there, and it's a big open space. The lake has receded so much over the years. Of course, it's not like you can see it or anything of that nature, but you can definitely feel that something is there in this other dimension. And what's interesting about that is they can tweak it into the fourth dimension. They can be sitting in the fourth dimension, but they can have their screens and the outer part of the craft, they can make those transparent, and they can be looking out into our realm in the 3D world to see what's going on as well. So Dr. Frank said a lot of times when they would pick him up at the hotel in Las Vegas, they had cars, boats, motorcycles, everything in the whole of the craft. That what they would do is he called it a very shield, and so when the car would be approaching it, that only that little section of the craft opened up, so you could only see it if you were directly looking into it. If you were on the side, you wouldn't be able to see it. But when the car went in, you would see the car disappear into nothing. So they were always very careful to make sure people didn't see, but they could also turn people's minds away from seeing it as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you're bringing up there. Have you guys both had the opportunity to listen to an interview that was done 23 years ago, 22 years ago, 21 years ago? It was in Scandinavia. So obviously it wasn't done in English, but it's been translated and using a computer translator. So it sounds like the QAnon guy talking to you. But it was the Lacerta interview with an alleged reptilian woman.
Yes.
It's interesting you bring that up. I've been studying that lately. I don't know what to make of that. I really don't. I'm just kind of 50-50, but it is incredible. If it's true, it's incredible.
Yes.
One of the things that kind of strike me, and this is where my police brain kicks in, it was 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the stuff that it was talking about in that interview is kind of a lot of things that people talk about in the last 5 years of the opening up of ufology is more of a mainstream thing, or maybe not even 5 years, but 10 years, where things have kind of opened up where people like you guys can go out in public and talk about it and not get thrown into a rubber room. Right. You can talk about your own experiences. This is it was in the 1980s. This happened or 1989, 90. And it's fascinating to go back and think, okay, it was that long ago, but what the interview covers is stuff that UFO or alien experiencers are coming forward with now. And in my experience, in talking to them at conferences and things, they've never listened to the interview because it's been floating around on the web for probably 15 years, but it was released, but they hadn't heard it before. But what was interesting is, and when you talk about the tall whites as being, the lighter beings, that interview is the alleged ET, Lacerta, says that we've got it mixed up. Like we think the light beings and the white ones are the good ones, where they're actually not the good ones, and they are kind of will do us more harm. And they say we're thinking of it as light, like the universal love and light kind of thing. Right. When it comes down to light, dark, they're talking about the light ones aren't good. The darker ones and the mixes are good. But we in our woo-woo brains are going, oh, light and darkness and stuff. No, it's just light, dark.
That's right.
Black, white. It's not.
That's right.
It's not. We're injecting this love and light thing to it, but in real life, in reality, and in her explanation, Lacerta's explanation was, no, you got it mixed up. It's dark, and we've lived here forever. You guys are the ones up top who are kind of screwing things up, and you were the DNA mix, that the experiment. But we've been here forever, and
the thing that drives me nuts about that stuff. I mean, I've been reading this stuff for 40 years, and you would think that one would be truth. I mean, that would be but you read that and you read 20 others, and none of them, they're all different, completely different. So that there's no similarity between it's the same thing with a lot of stuff. So I go by my own discernment totally. I rarely. Like Dr. Greer, I don't. This stuff is incredible, but it doesn't. I use my own judgment. I come to my own conclusion, because it's just if you get off on some of these tangents, like I see people do it all the time. They get pulled off into Neverland into a fantasy land, and they're stuck. I can't afford that. I've never been in a. No. That luxury of being doing that. So I pick a little bit here, like Lacerta, a little bit here, a little bit there, try to make it jive with what I know from my own research, and then I go from there. And I used to get attacked constantly. This is the 45th radio show I've been on in 13 months. And nobody, I figure probably 40 million people have seen me, and I haven't been attacked once. So what I say now really resonates with people as truth, because I used to get attacked viciously, constantly. And some of these were professional debunkers, professional skeptics, out to, derail UFO researchers and whatnot. And they were very successful. They destroyed, we know that. They destroyed a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I gave up for a while and then come back to it. But I stick with my own research that I know is true, and then go from there, So it's tough. It's tough.
Well, it's hard. Tom, you and I have had conversations, well, probably not together. I don't think we've had them together, with Travis Walton.
Yeah.
And the crap that he and the boys went through, or the guys he worked with went through. And one of their main critics, the debunker, was years later found out he was getting paid by the CIA.
Right.
Yeah, Philip Klass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that wonderful Larry King interview where they're all on that. And at one point you're looking at Travis and it looks like he's about to come over the friggin' table. Because that's just Travis. Travis, until he retired, he was still working in a lumberyard. He was running the thing, and he's your basic good rural, Arizona kind of don't screw with me kind of guy, or I will come over the friggin' table.
I ran into Travis one night, it was about 2 years ago, and it was after a conference. He was out in the high-rise parking deal fixing the alternator on his truck. Just a regular guy.
Yep. Yeah. And I was going to interview him that night, but he had to fix the alternator so his kid could drive back home.
Oh, geez. Oh, that's right. We were there. We were both there.
Yeah, that's where I first met you.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. No, and I think I met you before that. But yeah, that was the second time I met you. Was that one?
Yeah, we were both. Yeah, universe works in strange ways.
Yeah,
it totally does. It totally does.
But Travis had an experience again in 2014. And I think they were going to, last time I talked to him, which was, I think in LA in 2019. Yeah, because they didn't go anywhere last year because of the apocalypse. But they were looking at or making another movie. Basically, they're making the real movie as opposed to what the Fire in the Sky ended up turning into.
Right.
Yeah. So, very, very interesting. He's but his experience with the naysayers and the being targeted as don't tell your story.
Yeah.
That is crap. Yeah.
Right. And his story is one of the most well documented stories. And on top of that, it was Stanton Friedman gave it the stamp of approval. And, that guy really does his homework, and Stanton would never do anything like that. And Jennifer Stein, as you know, did the wonderful DVD many years ago. They won something like 50 film festivals. It's a really good reenactment of the story, but also on her MUFON page, her and Ron James of MUFON TV also put together an extended reenactment of what happened on the craft. It's really, really good, and people should definitely go and watch it. Yeah. So I wish I had the website right here, but I know it's MUFON. Maybe it's Jennifer Stein, or look up Travis Walton, Jennifer Stein on YouTube and see what pops up.
Do you hear that MUFON actually in some newly released CIA documents has actually been being influenced by the CIA?
Well, I mean, would you think that?
Yeah, I think they'd be somebody, the CIA, who'd want to kind of push back at the UFO reporting. That would definitely be infiltrated. I
think they wouldn't want to push back. I think they'd want to know about it,
and then maybe try to quiet people, shut people up. Yeah.
No, here's my take on all of that. These days, they know this is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
They're here. Everything is out there, and I think they are welcoming people talking about it so that people get more in tune with it. I have always felt that even though there's a bad part of the government, the military-industrial complex, they have also created a good part to offset it and to help promote this new way of life that will be when we become fully conscious. Maybe we start moving into the next dimension, and we become reacquainted with universal society. And I actually believe that throughout all of this time, all the hybrids and things that have been made in the positive sense will probably also be here to start living on the planet, because a lot of them are hybrids of human, extraterrestrials, and Earth genes as well. So, and then in several of the races I've studied, some of the Greys who did it in who did their hybrid programs, not in the negative sense, but with permission for genetic materials, that they've, after about 3 or 4 generations, they start to look human. Yeah. And then if they keep mating with the human each time, a full human, then that DNA is also will be a part of this. Who's to say we don't have that in us already? I mean, one never knows. We could have reptilian DNA in us as well. I mean, we really don't know. I mean, what'll be interesting is one day when Ancestry.com has a section for find out where your extraterrestrial origins are from.
I got to throw this in. Lloyd Pye was a good friend of mine, a real good friend. And he said, he proved actually that about 30,000 years ago, extraterrestrials spliced their DNA in with ours. He proved it. Because we have certain things wrong with us that other animals don't have. There's at any rate. So I think that if human extraterrestrials splice their DNA in with us, we are becoming them now.
Yes.
We are starting to do some of the things that they can do, like remote viewing or whatever, this incredible psychic stuff. Mm-hmm. So they're really, really interested in us now. They're watching this. Wow, look at what they're doing. They're doing our stuff. They're beginning to be us, which I think is fantastic. I mean, it's my theory, but I think it's real. I think it's right.
My cousin, who's father was my father's brother. This is about almost 20 years ago, or maybe not quite 20 years ago now. He sent in for a DNA thing, and not like the Ancestry.com or 23andMe. This is back when it was pretty, you got a binder back on your DNA.
Yeah.
And our DNA on my dad's side of the family, the male side of the family, started 30,000 years ago. Just appeared 30,000 years ago in the area where the Suez Canal is now.
Really?
And then it was tracked up through, like, around Turkey, Afghanistan, up over top of Europe, to Scandinavia, the top of the United Kingdom, down, and in 1912 came over to Canada with my grandparents.
Yeah.
So, and, I talk to people, and some people say, well, humans have been around for 70,000 years, after Neanderthal or whatever, or Cro-Magnon, whatever. And I said, yeah, but my DNA, and we did it. I used to have a series called Two Mediums and a Large, where I would have two mediums come on and people could phone in and get a reading. And I happened to mention it to them one day, and I said, like, where did my DNA come from? And they both laughed at me, and they said, yeah, your ancestors weren't from around here. It's like, really? Just because it literally just appears on 30,000 years ago in the I guess semi-Holy Lands back then, or around where the Suez Canal is, and then just moves right over top of Europe. But it was a long walk, 30,000 years, to get over into the UK. And that was just my dad's side. My mom's side, whole other challenge that, I can't really look into. I guess I could and get her brother's DNA and go from there, the male side. But I
got to throw this in with you guys. This baffles me completely. David Jacobs says that the hybrids are in a position to basically take over the earth. And I try to follow that. I mean, his credibility, David Jacobs, his credibility is almost 100%, but I don't get it. I don't know how, even with what I know about hybrids, I don't see how they could be. But he says, yeah, they're in a position they could take over the earth if they wanted to.
Well, would that position be just because of the volume of them?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they want to take possession or what. I don't know.
Or just become so populous that we'd be the only ones on Earth, or they'd be the only ones on Earth.
Yeah.
No,
We're consciously saying I'm hybrid, I'm taking over.
I just think that at a certain point when this changeover happens, that these hybrids, benevolent hybrids, will then be placed here as part of the population that will be teachers for the rest of the people on Earth. We'll teach them about the cosmos, the universe, that kind of thing. Teach them about higher spirituality, and how to actually now start to use their given gifts, because when you become fully conscious, you also become a creator and can create at will. So I believe that there will be all of these different things, and I think also too, because I've known so many hypnotherapists, and I've done some regressions myself, that I think that what they're doing is they will assist everybody in all of those areas, so that the world then just starts shifting over more and more, and the vibration keeps going up, and then we can start venturing out and going and visiting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it would be a hostile takeover, but I agree. Yeah. I agree with you 100%. Well put. Yeah.
But what I think the point I was trying to make is a lot of the abductees, their experiences are very traumatic, and some of them over time have learned that they're a starseed, and part of their contract was to come here and lend their DNA. But others, some of these malevolent gray races and reptilians and humans as well, just come and rape some people of their genetic materials as well, or use women as incubators.
Yeah.
I just heard I was listening to a podcast earlier, and they said Because they always leave the baby in for 2 to 3 months before they take it and then move it into a laboratory. And somebody was saying on this podcast that on the 49th day of a fetus, the pineal gland activates, and that's when the soul takes root. So I wonder if they wait until that gestation period because they have to wait for that soul to take root. Otherwise, they're just going to have a cloned body. Right.
Interesting.
All the people that I interviewed that had fetuses taken, every single one of them. It was the same, exactly the same. Like I think it was 30 days or whatever. Every single one of them. So I often wonder why. What was the why? Why did the fetus disappear at 35 days? So you've got a good point there. I couldn't figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, but that made sense to me. I mean, that totally made sense to me because it was about the soul anchoring in the actual fetus. So that totally made sense because you can't bring a life into this world without a soul into it. You can bring a clone into this world without a soul, but then it's void.
Yeah, a few of the psychics said because part of my podcast has always had a lot of psychic input into it. When what I believe is real psychics, not the COVID psychics who all of a sudden popped up everywhere. But they talked about the infant, the fetus. I said, well, when does the soul come in? And they say, well, it comes in, at around, the 30 to a month and a half part. But it can literally come in and kick the tires and go, this may not go to term. And then take a step back.
Right.
Or, we're going to go to term, but we will die of cancer at the age of 18 months. But there's a reason for that. And that reason was going to be how that death is the drop of water in the pond and how that ripple effect goes out to the family and everybody involved as a lesson that they were supposed to learn at this point in their life. So, when people say, why would God kill an infant? That soul knows coming in, this is what's going to happen. And they're the ones that kind of volunteer in and take a step back and it'll wait for another body some other time when it's supposed to come in. But it's always about that same, like you say, that 49-day, a little over a month coming in. Or do you say 49 weeks or 49 days?
No, 49 days.
Yeah, 49 days.
Yeah.
And then the pineal gland, again, that's interesting that that your source related it to the pineal gland activation. Mm-hmm. So, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I heard it for the first time this morning on a podcast. This guy.
Well, it's got to be real then.
Yeah, it has to be real, but it did make sense to me.
Yeah. So it does, it matches up with some other stuff that, we kind of talk about over a coffee sometimes.
I think I'm going to Google that. When does the pineal gland?
And how do we know it activates then?
Yeah. I don't know. Or maybe it's formed. Maybe it's fully formed at 49 days.
Yeah. So interesting.
That's a Googleable.
We're coming up to the end because remember, Tom is in the future.
That's true.
He's an hour ahead of us.
Yes.
So,
that's right. He is in the future.
Yeah. I always bug my friends in Australia. When someone says, the world's going to come to an end on January 5th, I'll phone them on January 4th and said, has it come to an end yet?
Right. There you go. That's right. You're a day ahead.
And again, for those following along at home, TomDongo.com. And you can read about Tom and see what book he's got out. And for Craig, it's autobiography of an ET.com. And also, that'll bring you out to a whole bunch of other things. And they're both on Facebook.
Yeah,
the Facebook.
They are, yes, and the ET Almanac's on Facebook and The Stranger at the Pentagon. People can watch the short film on the website or on Amazon Prime.
Have you guys got some opinions on the Skinwalker Ranch?
Oh, jeez. Craig, go ahead. You don't want to get me started on that.
Don't get me started. Okay, here's my thing.
I think it's awesome, but don't get me started on that.
Yeah, I think my thing with that, if I was on the Skinwalker Ranch, And they've got all those guys out running around with scientific stuff and a bunch of guys carrying machine guns.
Yeah.
Anyway, I would just get a picnic table, stick it in the middle of a field, turn a microphone on, a tape recorder on, and just sit there and start talking and see if I get anything. But we talked. Well, I brought up the word hive and underground base. That's kind of what I think that place, and it's got all sorts of different. Some people call them portals. It's just an energy. It's just one of those places like you talk about, Tom, as being you got 5 bases. A couple of them are human-run bases, and the other ones aren't. And that's what I think is the Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, there's something supernatural going on there. That's not going on anywhere else in the world. Not like there. So it's ongoing, and it's getting a little bit weirder every year.
Yeah, and I do believe there are negative ETs below that land.
I do too.
And I see them in a giant ship that is sort of, beneath that land, or that could be connected to a base, because a lot of people don't realize they do have that technology. They can actually just beam that craft in there, and it just molds to whatever depth and whatever they need instantly. And then if they want to build out, it's very easy for them to do that.
But,
that makes sense for the amount of poking around that people do, and then the government come in and just like, okay, what have you done?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, well, I've remote viewed Skinwalker Ranch right from the beginning. It's stuff that I'd have fun with it. It'd be fascinating, but there's something there that really is creepy, and it's real scary. During my remote viewing, I have found something out there. I don't believe in a devil or Satan, but there is something out there. I call it awful evil, and it's more evil than anything we can ever imagine. And I think it's been there on the Skinwalker Ranch. I call it an awful evil. And in the Amityville house in New York, it was in there, and it was coming out of the ground in the basement. So I went down in there, and that thing, I don't know what it is. I really don't. But it's there. We need to know about it. We need to be aware of it. I call it an awful evil, and it's it's like a cauldron of evil souls that sort of become a consciousness.
We'll end with this. Dr. Frank told me once that Valiant Thor took him out to the desert, and that he started moving his hands over the land, and he asked him what he was doing. He said that a cauldron of evil souls were trying to take root in this area so that they could gain power and then start moving around. So actually what he was doing was removing them and confining them so that they couldn't do that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That is cool, because I know that dead people who haven't crossed over can definitely access power from the land, especially crystal areas like Tombstone, Arizona, all that silver and quartz in there, and like the solar loading from the sun. You can see dead people there easily. Sedona, the same thing. There's just so much energy, that iron oxide in the mountains. It's like it vibrates. Yeah. It was funny. I was at Sedona. I was the airport vortex. A lady took me on a tour there, and she was probably in her late 60s. This is it was the same year I was down and saw you, Tom. This was about 5 years ago. And she said, we're going to go on a hike up there. And it was like 90 degrees. And I started hiking, and I'm not getting tired. And I said, it's funny. I'm not out of shape, but you're making me climb this mountain, or a small, well, not a mountain. It's like a 45-degree angle hike up a hill in the heat. Yeah. And I got up to the top, and I was fine. And I said, I don't know why I'm not tired. And she looked at me and smiled and said, you, of all people, should know why you're not tired, because you're on top of this bundle of energy, and it wasn't exhausting.
No.
So
that's
Tom,
right.
I need to find a house in Sedona. Or somewhere in that area. Oh, and Tom, before you go, next time you're in town in Cottonwood, David Childress is his bookstore. If you're standing in front of it,
right.
There's a little used clothing store to the left.
The left, yeah.
There's a First Nations lady from Canada who is in there, looks after the store for her aunt. She was a prison guard in Arizona at a women's prison, but she's got some ghost stories.
Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take
Drop in and say, hey, I know this guy James. He talked to you about ghosts one day, and yeah, she's once you get her going, she'll like the prison she was at.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet.
She's that way inclined, and yeah, it's very. But it was.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a whole hour show in about a month on another show on possession, just on possession.
Wow.
I know a lot about it, and I'm good at it. So it's going to be a whole hour show just on possession.
Okay, then you're going to have to come back and do that on my show, too.
Okay. It's fascinating. I mean, it scares the hell out of some people, but if they're aware of it, they don't have to worry. They don't have to be
right.
No.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, attachments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We deal with that a lot. We just pulled I did a remote view, through a psychic in L.A., at a house in L.A., an apartment, where this woman had an attachment show up, and we're trying to deal with that. And it's just an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
It all came through an ex-boyfriend.
Yeah.
Really, really bizarre attachment. Again,
it only affects people that are unaware. If you're aware and know about it, it won't bother you. It won't affect you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's or those with who are going through, usually a higher vibration person, going through an illness or a trauma, and their vibration drops, and they step right in.
Yeah, drunk or drugs or an emotional thing. Yeah, it leaves people wide open for attack.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you,
Campobasso, Tom Dongo. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Craig, we still need to get together and do one on and going through your book, picking page by page.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to do that. Let's do that.
And Tom, I'm going to hit you up a few more times. And
I'll be on anytime.
Merging Dimensions, Tom Dongo, and the Extraterrestrial Almanac, Species Almanac. With
there
Craig.
It is.
Also, both are on Amazon.
Great. Awesome book.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, guys.
All right, guys. See you later. Bye-bye.
That's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.